I'm continuing to work my way through this introductory volume of classical tragedy, Greek and Roman, and I've decided that as part of this project, whenever I finish a play, I'm going to see what professional adaptations are freely available on YouTube. So I've just finished Antigone, which I reviewed in a previous video, and I'll link to that in the description down below in case you missed it. And there are a lot of adaptations of Antigone. A few of them are on YouTube, and I'm going to do my best to work through all the ones I can find. Now, if you Google adaptations of Antigone, or put Antigone into the YouTube search, one of the first things that comes up, or at least for me, is the 1886 version, which was done by the BBC. But it turns out that that 1886 version is actually part of a whole trilogy that the BBC did at that time called the Theban plays, which is Oedipus the King, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone. So I decided I'd watch the whole trilogy. It's available on YouTube. There are a few different channels that have uploaded it. In the description down below, I'll link to the versions that I've watched, but you can find different channels hosting them. I think it's pretty much just the same version that different channels have uploaded. It's not a terribly good copy, any of the channels that are hosting it. It's an old VHS tape that somebody, I guess, taped off of TV when it was being broadcast, and then was converted into a digital file and uploaded onto YouTube. It's not a great copy, but it's watchable. It's a pity that there's not a better copy available on YouTube, because it's a really great adaptation. Like, the acting is really good. I'd highly recommend this. But I take comfort in the fact that a more well-preserved version is probably out there somewhere. At least I certainly hope so. I mean, the impression I get about the BBC Archive service from watching some of the Doctor Who fan-made videos on YouTube is that BBC does have a history of not preserving its archives. But I think by 1980 that problem was largely sorted. So hopefully, if you are willing to pay the money, or or order the cassettes, the DVDs or the VHS tapes from the BBC, a nice version of these does exist somewhere, because even through the kind of somewhat grainy, blurry VHS copies that are uploaded onto YouTube, you get the sense that this was really a good adaptation. Not in terms of budget. It's all done on a sound stage. But in terms of the acting, and the music. The music is really nice as well. But let me back a step up maybe and talk about what this is. So this is a trilogy of plays that Sophocles wrote about the Oedipus family. Kind of. Actually, if you go to Wikipedia, or if you go to search the internet, it's not technically a trilogy. There's only one surviving trilogy we have from the Greek plays, which is the Oresteia, which I've reviewed on this channel before, and again, I'll try and remember to link to everything I talk about in the description down below. So that was meant to be all performed on the same day, one play right after another, and that was what the trilogy was to the ancient Greeks. This is not a trilogy in the same sense. These were three plays that Sophocles wrote about the Oedipus family. And in fact, he wrote them out of order. Antigone, which takes place last, he wrote first. Then he wrote Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the King, which takes place first. And then the second play in the trilogy he wrote last, which is Oedipus at Colonus. Now, Oedipus at Colonus I actually have not read because it's not in this volume. The only two plays in this volume are Oedipus the King and Antigone. So I'm missing Oedipus at Colonus, although like I said, that one was written last. So in theory, you shouldn't need to read it first before reading Antigone, because it didn't exist when Antigone was first written. I do hope to someday read Oedipus at Colonus. It's not in this volume, but hopefully someday I'll track down a volume that does have it. My normal rule is that I don't want to watch the adaptation before I read the play. But I made an exception in this case because the play is not in this volume. And this is a trilogy that was all filmed together and broadcast on the BBC in 1986. So because this was part of a trilogy, and because I had read 2 out of those plays from the trilogy, I just watched the whole thing. So this was my first time going through Oedipus at Colonus. I had read the Wikipedia article on it, but this is my first time actually sitting through it. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about Oedipus at Colonus. And because I haven't talked about that one yet, the temptation would be to just give all my thoughts on Oedipus at Colonus. But I think I'm going to try to resist that for the purposes of this review. For this review, maybe I want to talk about the production as a whole, and then hopefully someday in the future, the near future, the distant future, I'll track down a volume of these plays which has Oedipus at Colonus in it, and I'll actually read the play properly, then maybe rewatch the adaptation and maybe give my thoughts on that in a separate video. But yes, this adaptation. So again, in the ancient world, this was not considered a proper trilogy, but it can easily make a trilogy. It's 3 plays all about the same family, which if you rearrange them into chronological order, you put the second one first, you put the last one second, and you put the first one last, in order to make a chronological story. Then you have Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone. You know, you can see the temptation to do this because it does make up one long story. And although I said that it was not considered properly a trilogy by the ancients, you can clearly see in Oedipus at Colonus, which was written last, that Sophocles is definitely leading into Antigone. I mean, he knows, he's already written Antigone at this point, so he knows exactly what he wants to lead into, and he's setting up all the chess pieces exactly where he wants to be. I mean, it's kind of like, this comparison is probably sacrilege, but it's kind of like Rogue One from a Star Wars story. It perfectly sets up A New Hope, even though it came after A New Hope. And even though you can enjoy A New Hope fine without seeing Rogue One, when you see Rogue One, you can see how the filmmakers are trying to perfectly set everything up or lead directly into the original Star Wars. Hopefully that comparison is not stretching things too much. So yeah, you can see how these plays definitely all lead into each other. And the same characters appear in many of them. So it would have been a perfect opportunity to have the same actors, and some of the actors are the same. So the guy who plays Creon, who has a major role in all 3 plays, is the same guy. They changed the actor for Oedipus between Oedipus the King and Oedipus at Colonus, which struck me as kind of a little bit of a waste. I mean, why not just keep the same actor? But they wanted to, I'm assuming, I haven't seen this written anywhere, but I'm assuming they wanted to make a contrast between the young Oedipus and the old Oedipus. Because Oedipus at Colonus is Oedipus at the end of his life. Oedipus the King is Oedipus when he's middle-aged or something. And then the daughters Antigone and Ismene appear as little girls in the first one, so they're played by little girls. But then for Oedipus et Colonis and Antigone, they're played by the same actresses. So there is some actors and actresses are changed up because of aging differences. But there is definitely an attempt at a continuity of production. And other actors like Tiresias, the blind prophet, is the same in both the first one and the last one. The dialogue is very good. It's incredibly modern sounding. Now, this is actually my fourth time through Oedipus the King. I read the version in this edition here. Then I saw so that was my first time. Then I saw the 1957 movie. Then I saw the 1969 movie. Now the BBC 1986 movie is my fourth time through. And the BBC 1986 movie production TV show, the BBC 1986 version is, I think, my favorite version so far, insofar as it just seems really modern. So having, again, since this is my fourth time through this play, I recognize the beats of it well. I know, okay, now he's going to say this, now he's going to say that, now he's going to respond to that. It's been a different translation each time, but I know what the flow of the conversation is. And this was the most modern translation I've seen yet. So now I suppose there's an argument to be made for keeping the translation not modern, keeping it as authentic to the original language as possible. But I was really impressed by how much they made this come alive, how this did not feel like a dusty classic at all. It felt like real people talking, and you can completely see how it just comes alive for a modern audience. And I was thinking, okay, this actually works. You know, this is something you could recommend to your friend without a lot of caveats or without a lot of guilt. You can say, go ahead and watch this. I mean, it would be nice if there was a better copy available on YouTube. But as it is, it's watchable, and it's very good for a modern adaptation. In the dialogue and everything, it just sounds really modern and sounds like a modern play. Now, I read somewhere on the internet, and I'll try and remember to link to the article I read this on in the description down below, that the guy who did this adaptation, a guy named Don Taylor, actually didn't go back to the original Greek for this. He looked at other translations, and then he made his version from those other translations. I've only read this in one place on the internet. I'm not sure how true that is. I mean, that would presumably be an argument against authenticity, although the sources he was borrowing from were presumably good translations. And, you know, speaking as somebody who can't read Greek, but who has now been through this play 4 times, definitely all the dialogue was there. I didn't feel like anything got left out. There were a few lines that had somewhat of a different interpretation, I think, particularly at the end of Oedipus Rex, when Creon is refusing to banish him, Oedipus, and Creon tells him to come into his house, and when Oedipus says, "Don't take my children from me," and Creon said, "Don't you dare give me orders. Haven't you learned your lesson?" That was a little bit different than the previous 3 versions, where Creon says something like to the effect of, "You no longer rule." So, you know, close, but a little bit different. Again, as somebody who doesn't speak the original Greek, I don't know. Oedipus at Colonus, like I said, this was my first time through it. So I'll pass over that one for now. I'll come back to that later. And then Antigone. Antigone as well was, the dialogue was just really modern. And it was a pleasure to watch. I really got caught up in the dialogue. I was like, wow, this is great. This really makes me feel the drama of this Greek play. Hearing them speak, and it sounds just like a modern play. It even though it's 2,500 years in the past it was written, the drama, the emotions, the dialogue, it just seems to pass the test of time so great. But I did notice several times when I was watching the Antigone movie, I'm like, that is a really great line. I don't remember that at all. So I was constantly pausing the YouTube video one. I've got a smart TV, so I'm watching it on the big screen and pausing it. Or it's not mine, it's the landlord's. And anyways, I was constantly pausing it. And comparing that with the version I have here, translated by Dudley Fitz and Robert Fitzgerald. And the translation was quite different. The basic meaning was there, but very often, very often, the line in here would be very short, and the line in the BBC Don Taylor version would be much longer. So I don't know if he was adding in a lot more dialogue than was in the original Greek to make it, to just make sure that the point didn't get lost. You know, in the ancient Greek, a lot of these lines were very short, but a lot of these short lines he has perhaps enlarge them, or I don't know. Like I said, I don't speak the original Greek, so who knows, maybe this translation is the one that's too short and his was closer to the original. I don't know, but yeah, it was noticeable that the 1986 BBC version of Antigone, the speeches were a lot longer and the lines were a lot more, were a lot longer and a lot more unambiguous in their meaning. Where this translation would seem to imply something with a short line, in that version they would say it directly, and say it fuller. But that being said, what a production. The actors were great. The dialogue, whether it was entirely faithful to the original or not, was really good. You really felt this ancient play come alive. As with Oedipus at Colonus as well. That one really felt very lively as well. And I think both Oedipus at Colonus and Antigone benefited from a lot of dramatic music as well. And to a certain extent Oedipus the King as well, but a little bit less so that one. Oedipus at Colonus and Antigone had some really dramatic music which helped to really sell those scenes, in addition to the very modern sounding dialogue, in addition to some very fine acting by actors just giving it their all. And I mean, not overacting it, but just acting it with just enough drama to really sell it. I thought it was really well done. Now, that being said, I think maybe this is just something inherent in the original source material, in the original plays. I got bored near the end. I think to a certain extent with each play, but Oedipus the King I'm quite used to. And Oedipus the King actually doesn't really let up. It's the climactic action is weighted towards the end. The climactic action is weighted towards the end in Oedipus the King. But in both Oedipus at Colonus and Antigone, I thought that the climatic action was weighted more towards the middle. That there were some very dramatic scenes that happened right about the midpoint. And then both of them had kind of an extended coda ending where there was a lot of speeches being given, but the main drama was over. And for both of those, I wouldn't say it was bored stiff. It was still quite watchable, but I wasn't quite as enthralled for the last half hour in both Oedipus and Colonus and Antigone. I think both of those plays, the BBC 1986 version, first 90 minutes was absolutely gripping drama. Last half hour lagged a bit. What was I going to say? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Drama, gripping. I was going to say something else. I forget. The last half hour lagged a bit, and again that could just be because in the original, the last half hour lagged a bit, and maybe in these maybe that's just a difference between ancient expectations of drama and modern expectations, or ancient attention spans and modern attention spans. I remember what I was going to say. Each of them is about a solid 2 hours. I'm not sure how long these plays were when they were staged in antiquity. Maybe 2 hours was how long the Greeks sat through a play as well. Like I said, I certainly felt with Antigone that a lot of dialogue had gotten added in here. So maybe that added an extra dialogue, lengthened the runtime a little bit, or maybe 2 hours is the way it's supposed to be. I don't know. The costumes for this play, for the BBC production, were modern costumes, or kind of like Victorian, Edwardian type costumes, which I think that's almost become a cliche to do old plays, or certainly Shakespeare plays, in kind of Victorian dress, either because that's easier for the costume department or because modern audiences like that, I don't know. But even though it's kind of a cliche for theater productions to do old plays in more modern dress, I think it worked. I think if everyone had been standing around wearing togas or something like that, it would have distracted a little bit. So having them wear kind of these more Victorian uniforms made the play seem more connectable, more relatable. The one decision that I thought was a little bit traditional was having the chorus all talk at once during some of these points. So I think the two previous versions of Oedipus Rex I've watched, the 1957 version and the 1969 version, avoided having the chorus all talk in unison. The lines of the chorus would be just given to different members of the chorus. And I know in the ancient Greek, the chorus was supposed to all talk in unison, I believe, in the original ancient Greece. But sometimes when they're all talking at once, even if they're making an effort to talk in sync, it can sound a little bit jumbled. And there are a few points where the voices became a little bit jumbled. It became a little bit difficult to hear what the chorus was saying when they were all talking in sync. I think that's the only thing I really didn't like, or the small criticism I would have of this particular production. The actors and actresses, like I said, are all really spectacular. I've Googled a few of them, and I don't think, somebody tell me if I'm missing anything, I don't think anybody is really famous. They were all kind of stage performers who had bit roles in films. The guy who plays, for example, the guy who plays Oedipus Rex in the first film, I forgot his name, I did Google him, but he's in Return of the Jedi. He's the guy who greets Lord Vader when Vader's getting out of the shuttle, and Vader tells him he's behind on schedule, and that the Emperor is upset, and he's the guy who says, "We need more men. He has the impossible." And Vader says, "You can tell the Emperor yourself when he comes here in person. The Emperor is not as forgiving as I am." That scene, right? That's the guy who's doing Oedipus Rex Oedipus the King in the first movie. The second movie, Oedipus, is done by somebody named Anthony Quayle, who has been in a number of movies, including some movies I've seen, like Lawrence of Arabia and The Guns of Navarone. However that's pronounced. And then the guy who does Creon, who does a tremendous job, and he's in all three versions, is somebody who's been in small bits in a number of different movies. He played Nestor in the movie Troy, etc. I don't want to waste your time with too much of this IMDb trivia stuff. You can look this up yourself easily enough, huh? But point being, a very good cast. No superstars as far as I recognized, but Shakespearean actors who have done bit parts in big Hollywood films. And I think maybe that's all I have to say about this. I mean, it's tempting to talk about the individual plays. Oedipus Rex, I think, did a very good job of milking the drama of Oedipus finding out his origin. Oedipus at Colonus, I said I wasn't going to spend a lot of time talking about it. There would be plenty to talk about if we wanted to. The play, I got the impression that it wasn't as structurally as tight as the two other plays in the trilogy, but there were just all things going on there. A crossover with the Athenian hero Theseus, a lot of politics that were going on in the Peloponnesian War, a very nice bridge between Oedipus the King and Antigone, kind of connecting the plot threads. A lot of things that we could talk about, but I'm not going to. Someday I'll read the play properly, and then I'll talk about it more at that time. And Antigone. I mean, the Antigone, as I said in my review of the play, has a lot of good themes about moral responsibility and individual consciousness versus the authority of the state. And that came through very well in this BBC production. Again, the dialogue was very clear, again, possibly elaborated on from the original, but was making some very solid points in a way that was very elaborated, and the drama was very well set up, and and full of very good lines, like I said before. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like most of those lines are in the original play, or at least not in the same version in the original play. Although again, I don't know the ancient Greek. But in the BBC production by Don Taylor was full of great quotable lines in his version of Antigone. Okay, I'm going to leave off here. Thank you very much, and I will track down more versions of Antigone on YouTube and report back once I've watched those.